Chapter 18, Ophanim at Work. The small theater screen scrambled for a moment, and then the children could see the entire setting. The Ophanim's eyes covered the cosmos. An Ophan, following a cherub from a dam, moved with a large satchel within its mouth. With each sweeping rotation, the children could see inside the triangular opening. They saw a satchel changing shape as if feet and arms were kicking against an expanding fabric. The unified command of Jerahab, Kohengal, and Nekemabed seat below the surface of Rahab and begin descending toward its center, quenching the outreach flames on the way. The light was compacted together in the stone's core, leaving an intense glow that aggressively pulled its surroundings to it. The surface instantly cooled and collapsed within itself. It compacted so tightly around the pull within the core that no light could escape. The heavens around Rahab darkened and the rumbling ceased. Suddenly, the children's screen went black and silence filled the theater. Rashawn did not read the next word. In his silence, Jerahab's voice rang out, "Rashawn, you are doing well. Children, this eternity as my angelics know it is coming to an end. Your age will unfold before you very soon. Watch, for my judgment comes swiftly and forcefully. I will not be mocked, and my words will not return void. These are the beginnings of my patterns. Remember them, and they will guide your judgments. It is to my glory that I have concealed these things, but it will be accounted to your honor to search them out. You will not fully grasp the patterns until the end of the second age. Rashawn is here to assist you in recognizing them, so do not let your countenance fall. Seek out my treasures." With that, Rashawn sat in awe. The children were dazed by the personal words Jerahab had spoken to them. These were not the words from the book of Tabnithiad. These were from its author. Rashawn looked down, trying to bring himself to read. After a few more moments of silence, he picked up where he had left off. When Jerahab cried out from the temple to signal the judgment on Rahab, the Olinthial host heard the call of Nagad's trumpet, beckoning them to return to Olinthial. As Jerahab's signal reached the stones of fire, the intense light within the core of Rahab exploded outward. Rahab was instantly dashed to pieces, hurling rocks of all sizes in every direction, crippling everything in their paths. The sound was deafening, and the entire cosmos was violently shaken. The illumination from the explosion was intense, and the heat was unbearable. Many blasts could be heard as huge rocks battered the surfaces of the remaining stones. Some of the burning chunks moved like missiles locked into their targets, hitting every structure on Zohar and most on Afar, yet purposely missing selected monuments on a dam. Sar's army was in total disarray as blazing rocks streaked the atmosphere, brutally shaking the heavens. Kohengal appeared amidst the stones of fire and ordered large burning rocks from the blast to penetrate the portal, while Nekemabed finalized the sealing of its entrance with his fire. This stopped the flow of the Asoavel. Kohengal then hurled a fiery boulder of brimstone toward Afar. The rock ripped through the waves and collided with Afar with such force that the impact reached to its core, burning out a vast empty space and creating a fissure. Sar's senses were overwhelmed by the shaking of the earth beneath him, the whizzing of flaming boulders in the heavens, and the sight of rocks bombarding his claimed kingdom. He could feel the presence of the cherubim and Ophanim from a dam, and he could not identify where they were. Sar could see Azazel kneeling on the ground with his hands over his head, attempting to shield himself from the rocks and debris falling from the sky. "Azazel, get up! Follow me!" Azazel forced himself to open his eyes. He could see Sar rapidly walking away and instantly stood up and ran after him. "I beg you, please do not leave me here alone, Sar," he howled. "What is happening?" They ran toward Shatar's old assembly. Sar could see a smoldering impression on its hillside. It was a newly formed cave made by the falling debris. Sar yelled out as he ran, "Or is challenging us. You can see he is not bold enough to face us himself." "Why aren't you stopping it?" Azazel panicked while running up beside him. Sar had begun to respond when he spotted the serpent at the cave's entrance. It was obvious to both Sar and Azazel that the serpent's size had greatly increased. He laid with his head just at the opening, his nostrils emanating a charcoal smolder, which was caused by the concentrated asoavel within the creature. "When did you get here?" Sar asked him in surprise. The serpent, now a dragon, slowly rose to his hind feet and stretched out a set of wings. The motion shook Sar and Azazel. Not only had the serpent increased in size, it had fully transformed into a dragon. Azazel leaned over to Sar and asked, "How did you do that?" Sar had no response to give, but wanted to take full credit for the serpent's transformation. "I told you he would be my representation. I have given him all my attributes." The three were now reunited and sheltered from the rain of fire and brimstone. As they stared out of the cave, they could see that afar had become a complete wilderness. The cities were empty of all life, and they watched pieces of brimstone destroy every building in sight. Shatar's palace had been reduced to ashes. This angered Sar. "My Isham can simply rebuild a palace for me here, but I will not allow my throne to be destroyed." He looked toward the sacred orchard and could still see in the distance the throne standing erect. Sar turned to the others, took the reins, and began devising a plan. "I sense Ur has sent the cherubim and the Ophanim companions." He looked again out of the mouth of the cave, "because he cannot get through my battle lines." "When will we join the army in the cosmos?" Azazel inquired. The dragon snorted out a large cloud of asoavel smoke as he spoke. "I will shield you from the rain. My skin has thickened, and my scales have become like iron. On your call, I am ready to proceed." "I am ready as well, my king," added Azazel. "Then let us move toward the heavens. My throne should be ready soon." Confident that the falling debris and brimstone was a result of his army moving into Olinthial, Sar looked into the sky, waiting for the perfect moment to send the dragon out. He paused. "I hear something. I recognize that sound. It is an Ophan. We need to follow that sound first." The dragon exited the cave. He spread his massive wings over Sar and Azazel as they moved forward. The three made their way toward a gaping fissure. Nearing the fissure, Sar's eyes squinted and moved ever so carefully like a lion stalking his prey. The noise of the Ophan barreled toward the fissure, alarming Sar. The dragon spurred forward, wrapping his wings around Sar and Azazel while turning his back to the fissure. He herded them away to safety. "Wait! Who is that shouting?" Sar turned to hear a familiar call. Kohengal directed the cherub to the gaping fissure created by the fiery boulder. The cherub then guided the Ophan to the exact spot of the entry into Afar's abyss. Once the Ophan had entered the fissure, the cherub returned to the temple in Salem. The Ophan elongated as it passed through the crust of the stone, beyond the mantle and into the core. Its eyes darted to and fro between the deposits of iron, nickel, copper, gold, and silver. The light from the fiery core glistened off the mixture of precious gems hidden deep within the stone's mantle. As the Ophan neared the raging molten center, the heat and smell from the judgment of Ur triggered a forceful reflex that caused it to spew the satchel out of his mouth. Horrifying screams burst from the empty space as the satchel broke open. Abaddon and his Isham, that had been captured from a dam, swam in the molten abyss. The Ophan withdrew with such great speed that its departure was missed on the screen. Nikamabed abruptly appeared at the abyss. He stretched out both arms. With a single word, streams of electrical forces radiated from each finger. The 10 lasers shot around the molten space, forming a bottomless sphere of fire precisely in the center of the universe. This solidified the capsule's perimeter, reinforcing it as an impenetrable floor for the incoming captives. The children had their ears covered, trying to suppress the piercing screams of Abaddon and his men. They could clearly see the angelics beating against the invisible walls. With each pounding, the angelics' forms changed. "Those do not look like Abaddon and his men to me," Megan said. "They look like dark shadows with flowing hair," Rachel responded. Rashawn paused to remind the children of how Abaddon and his men came to look this way. When the Ophan picked up Abaddon and the Isham from a dam, they were stripped of their Zood armor within the Ophan's mouth. Their judgment began during the trip to the abyss. Kohengal created the abyss just for them as a result of their plot to tamper with the dam and its prophetic monuments. "And I thought it was because they called Sar king," Connor commented in a semi-sarcastic voice. Point taken, Connor, Rashawn said. They were destined for judgment after they partook of Sar's tree, but were permitted the fullness of their rebellion before casting them away. You may not remember that part of the story of old where they reappear. I am sure we will see it happen. After all, the story of old is within the book of Tabnithiod. The cherub that had just delivered Abaddon and his men arrived at the great temple and returned to his position on the west side of the throne. Jerahab patiently sat on the throne waiting for the conclusion of the first age. Return to Afar and have your Ophan collect Sar and his 2 guests before the command is given for the realm of the regions to detach, Jerahab ordered. With a slight bow from his ox side, he moved back into the cosmos. The cherub transported to the waves, meeting his Ophan with their new instructions. Immediately, the eyes of the Ophan locked into the 3 remaining on Afar. It simply rotated and scooped up the 3 with one revolution of its triangular mouth. Kohengal aimed once more at Afar. He launched another flaming boulder into the fissure. This one was meant to create the reservoir for all of the other rebellious angelics. The massive rock flashed as it disappeared into the core of Afar. The stone of fire viciously trembled while the boulder plummeted to the bottom of the fissure. The cavity which held Abaddon and his men cushioned the blow from the burning chunk of iron. The heated iron instantly carved a path through the tightly packed earth and became a hollowed-out, scorched sphere. The top of the abyss acted as the floor of this reservoir and now glowed from the newly added flames of the second boulder. The area resembled the inside of a well-laced baseball, with twisted corridors of fire and a sundry of compartments inside. The Ophanim followed their cherubim's lead. Once Kohengal had created the reservoir, which was called Sheol, for the angelics who no longer exhibited Or's light, the cherubim called down the Ophanim that were collecting angelics within the cosmos. They were instructed to stretch forth from the waves into the fissure where they were able to release their captives. The Ophanim were able to exercise this command while still actively collecting angelics throughout the cosmos. Rashawn's words opened the small screen again, this time with the Ophanim moving into the fissure. The room was filled with flashes of light. "Let's dance," Connor said as he stood up and struck a pose. "This is like a strobe light." Micklehee quickly stood and joined Connor in his pose. The 2 moved into position to show off their moves. Several of the children laughed at the pair's antics, while Mia interrupted the festive mood with a serious question. "Rashawn, where are we?" Rashawn was not ready to stop reading because he could see several paragraphs ahead that would answer her question. As he continued to read, the children returned their attention to the flickering screen. There were 3 areas that opened with light in the surrounding theater. Each of the children picked one to watch. The goal was to figure out where they were and what they were looking at. "I think I see Zohar in the distance," Joshua said. "Do you see it?" "I don't see Zohar. I see a ton of rocks streaming by each time I get a glimpse outside," Rachel added. "What are you guys talking about? All I see is the waves full of dark spots," retorted Mia. Rashawn butted in. "Does anyone know where we are?" "No," came a unified response. "Take a moment and think about what you have seen. Where have we heard that noise before? Where have we seen this pattern of movement before?" Rashawn asked, prodding them to reason. Erin gulped when she realized the answer. "Are we inside the Ophanim?" "Great job, Erin," Rashawn stated. "We are looking out of each Ophanim's mouths." "Ew!" several girls shouted in unison. Rashawn decided it best not to respond to the girls' reactions. "That is why you are seeing different things. The 3 openings of light act like windows, which are actually each of their mouths." He moved the book closer to his lamp and started reading again. As he did, the text merged the 3 Ophanim's mouths together. While the scenes outside of each opening were different, the insides were all the same. The children's eyes had grown accustomed to the darkness and the muted pulsated light. Before their eyes, figures began to materialize. Each resembled the silhouette they saw falling toward Afar. The children wanted to ask Rashawn about them, but in this situation they felt that their words might be heard and their presence found out. So no one spoke a word. They simply listened to Rashawn reading about the importance of the Ophanim. After several more flickers of light, a group of angelics materialized, still covered in their Zood armor. They stood with a greasy film over their armor. The film softened the Zood and prepared it for removal. Terrible moans and screams rang out as the angelic's armor was stripped. This was required before the Asoavel could be drained from each of the rebellious angelics. The children could see a series of pouches like punching bags hanging from the roofs of the Ophanim's mouths. As the angelics yelled out in pain, the bags filled with their Zood and Asoavel. The number of beings within the Ophanim's mouth kept fluctuating. Why aren't there more angelics inside here? They keep bringing them in, but where are they going from here? Are they eating them? Morris asked this last question with dread. Kohengal's job was done on afar. He rejoined Jerahab in the temple to await Nekemabed's arrival. The cherubim that had been given the orders to seize Sar and his 2 companions presented himself before the throne. "My Ophan and I have fulfilled your orders. Would you like us to present them to you now?" the cherub asked. "Azazel must be taken to the others inside the fissure," Jerahab instructed. He then stood and handed the cherub a key. "Beyond the vineyard, near the northern gate of Salem, you will find a small prison. Lock Sar and the dragon inside until we are ready to address them." The cherub bowed. A loud roar echoed as his Ophan moved toward afar to fulfill his first instructions. Jerahab leaned over to the right side of his throne, peered down past another cherub's post, and followed the eyes of the Ophan down to afar. The view was spectacular. Kohengal approached and gazed down with him. They could see the angelics entering the Ophan's mouth. Below that was a cluster of tubes. As the angelics were rendered free of their Zood and Asoavel, they were then pushed down these enormous slide-like chambers. The enclosed chambers escorted the collected angelics directly into the scorching reservoir, which awaited them with the fire or had prepared for their judgment using Sar's very own prized stone of fire, Rahab. "How can that Ophan do that?" asked Megan. Rashawn paused. "Remember, the Ophanim are to remain attached to the throne room while still working throughout the cosmos. By elongating their bodies, they are providing a secure passage for the rebels." After speaking these words, the book of Tabnithiod vibrated in his hands. He had never experienced this before, so he took it as a sign to read on. As the last angelic was gathered, the screen zoomed the children down the fissure and to the opening of Sheol. They watched Azazel and the last of Sar's army being dumped into the burning cavity. The angelics scattered in every direction, trying to outrun the approaching black mass. "What is that black stuff?" asked Andrew. Rashawn put out his finger to acknowledge Andrew's question, but did not slow down his reading. The massive black sphere moved quickly toward Sheol. Suddenly, the sphere broke through the fire like a dark coal. The black mass exhibited great weight and rolled to the bottom of Sheol, resting on the abyss. It locked shut for a future purpose. Rashawn was now able to look up from the page. "Andrew, the black stuff is a culmination of all the smaller pouches that were hanging on the Ophanim's mouths," explained Rashawn. "After all the Zood and Asoavel had been collected, the pouches were gathered into one gigantic bag. The weight of the Zood and Asoavel turned the giant bag into a type of rock. It is to symbolize what the Zood has done to Sar and the others' hearts, turned them to stone." "How do you know all this?" asked Morris, looking at Rashawn in amazement. "Some of these things were taught to me as the keeper of secrets. Some of these things I have been uncovering in the story of old. It was my job to seek them out. Others are revelations that have been shared throughout the readings of the book of Tabnithiod. It has unlocked my knowledge, so to speak." Rashawn decided all that needed to be discussed had been touched on, so he returned to the text. Nekemabed stood at the opening of Sheol. "This is your temporary residence," Nekemabed shouted out to the masses. "You will never be a part of Olinthial again. This separation has been caused by your rebellion. Separation from Or has created your dwelling of woe, pain, despair, and black darkness. Princes of Sar, I order you to the dominions of judgment that were formed just for you. You will, every one, bow before the true one and confess that he is king." With these words, Nekemabed watched the remaining fallen angelics scattered throughout Sheol. Once Necamibed was satisfied that the gigantic bag had settled and all compartments were filled, he raised his arms and spoke the word, duplicating the process of sealing the abyss. Its new inhabitants could be heard moaning and screaming as the walls of Sheol solidified. The cherub spotted the small prison-like structure just outside of Salem's northern gate as Jerahab had described it. The structure's walls were made of bronze and its door was ablaze. It had no noticeable roof. Still showing his ox attributes, the cherub opened the door as the Ophan dumped their captives inside. The cherub then closed the door with Sar and his companion inside. Sar barked out in an attempt to sway the cherub. "Your service to Or will never be appreciated. Join me, and I will make you more powerful than Or ever would." The cherub was not affected by Sar's promises. Desperate, Sar charged the door, and the dragon tried clawing his way toward the open sky. The two of them proved to have no power in Olinthial. They had been stripped of their glorious Zud and Asoavel on their way up to Salem. "I am your superior. I demand you let me go immediately," yelled Sar as the cherub turned the key. The cherub was not intimidated by the words Sar yelled. He simply gazed upon the door that divided them in amazement, thinking over what had become of the one they once served under. As the cherub walked away, Sar continued barking harsh words in a desperate attempt to get his way. But the cherub had locked the door, rendering the captives bound and powerless.